You're 24 years old. You just landed your dream job at one of Wall Street's most powerful investment firms. The salary is $120,000 a year. Your desk has a view of the entire city. You think you've made it. Then, on a Tuesday night, 3 months in, you find a folder on the company server you were never supposed to open. And what's inside it changes everything. This is the story of how you accidentally uncovered a $4 billion fraud, and what you had to risk to expose it. Everything you're about to see is based on real events. The names and companies have been changed, but the moment I'm about to describe to you, the moment of choice, that moment is real. And it could happen to anyone. Let's go back to the beginning. 6 months ago, you were living in a one-bedroom apartment with 2 roommates. You'd graduated with a finance degree from a decent university. Not Harvard, not Yale, a state school. Your GPA was good, not great. You figured you'd end up at some mid-level accounting firm crunching spreadsheets for clients you'd never meet. You applied to 47 companies in 3 months. 46 of them said no. Then, on a Thursday morning in February, an email arrived. Apex Capital Management. $47 billion in assets under management. Founded by Richard Harlow. The Wall Street Journal had written about Richard Harlow twice. Forbes called him the future of American finance. You read the email 3 times before it felt real. The interview was on a Thursday morning. You took the subway uptown wearing the one suit you owned. You'd bought it at a discount store 3 years ago for a college fair. The office was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. The lobby was the most expensive-looking room you'd ever stood in. The receptionist smiled and offered you water. The chairs in the lobby cost more than your rent. You waited 15 minutes. Then Richard Harlow walked in. Richard Harlow was tall, confident, and moved like he owned every room he walked into. He probably did. He shook your hand for exactly 3 seconds, looked at your resume for 20 seconds. Then he looked up, looked at you and said, "I don't care where you went to school. I care about one thing." He leaned forward. "Can you keep a secret?" You said yes. You had no idea what you'd just agreed to. He offered you the job 2 days later. And 3 weeks later, you walked into that building for your first day. The first month was everything you'd imagined. The office hummed with energy. Everyone moved fast. Everyone talked fast. Every desk had 3 monitors. Your job was simple. Analyze investment reports, cross-check numbers, flag inconsistencies, report to your direct manager. Her name was Sandra Chen. Sandra was sharp, professional, and extremely private. She never talked about what the firm actually invested in. She just gave you reports and said, "Check the math." You checked the math. The math always checked out. You ate lunch at your desk. You stayed late most nights. You told your friends you were killing it. You bought new shoes, nicest pair you'd ever owned. Month 2, you were working late. It was around 11 p.m. And you needed a quarterly figure from the central server. You typed the wrong folder name. You ended up in a directory you'd never seen before. The folder was labeled /internal/shadow_ accounts/2023. You sat back in your chair. You told yourself it was probably nothing. You wrote down the folder name on a Post-it note. You found the figure you needed. You went home. But you didn't throw away the Post-it note. Over the next 3 weeks, you kept noticing small things. A client report that didn't match the summary Sandra gave you. A number that was slightly off. A transfer date that made no sense for the stated strategy. Each time, you told yourself there was a rational explanation. Each time, the rational explanation became slightly harder to believe. Sandra seemed to sense something was different about you. One afternoon, she stopped at your desk. "You doing all right?" she said. "Everything, making sense to you?" You said yes. She nodded and walked away. You watched her go and wondered, does she know? Does she know about the folder? That night, you lay in bed and made a decision. You were going to open that folder. The next Tuesday night at 10:47 p.m., you were the last person on the floor. The hum of the air conditioning was the only sound in the building. You opened the server, you typed /internal/shadow_accounts/2023/ the folder opened. 147 files, all dated between January 2021 and November 20 to 23. You opened the first file. It was a transaction record. $340 million transferred from a client account to a shell company called Meridian Holdings, LLC, registered in the Cayman Islands. You opened a second file. $180 million. Different client. Same destination. A third file. $620 million. You sat back in your chair. You've been studying finance for 4 years. You know what you're looking at. This is not a legitimate investment strategy. This is not a miscategorized account. This is fraud. The money isn't being invested. It's being moved out of client accounts into offshore accounts that almost certainly belong to Richard Harlow. You open your calculator. You start adding $340 million, $180 million, $620 million, $840 million, $1.2 billion, $890 million, $230 million. You press the total button. The calculator displays $4.3 billion, $4.3 billion, stolen from people who trusted this firm with their retirement savings, their life savings, their children's futures. You sit very still. For a long time. The hum of the air conditioning is still the only sound. Then, slowly, you close the laptop. You pick up your bag. You walk to the elevator. You press the elevator button. You don't look back at the office. The elevator closes. And for the first time in your life, you understand what it feels like to know something you can never unknow. Outside, the city goes on. Millions of people who have no idea what just happened. You don't tell anyone. Not yet. You don't sleep that night. You lie in bed staring at the ceiling. You run through the options in your head. Option 1. Do nothing. Pretend you never saw the folder. Keep your job. Keep your salary. Keep your life exactly as it is. After all, you weren't supposed to be in that directory. You found it by accident. This isn't your problem. But then you think about the clients, real people who worked their entire lives, who handed their savings to this firm believing it was safe. Option 2, tell Sandra, your direct manager. She has been here for 7 years. Does Sandra know? Could Sandra be involved? Option 3, go to the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. They handle exactly this kind of thing, but you're a 24-year-old analyst who's been at the company for 3 months. Your name will be attached to the complaint. Harlow's lawyers will come for you. You might never work in finance again. You think about your student loans. You think about your parents who sacrificed so much to get you here. And then you think about the people who lost $4.3 billion. And you realize those aren't abstract numbers. Those are people's lives. At 4 a.m., you get up, you sit at your kitchen table, and you start writing everything down, every transaction you remember, every file name, every date, every amount. You write for 2 hours straight. When you're done, you look at what you've written, and you know exactly what you're going to do. You spend the next 6 days building a case. Every day at the office, you act completely normal. You say good morning to Sandra, you eat lunch at your desk, you stay late and do your work. But every night when the office empties, you go back into the shadow accounts folder, and you document everything. Transaction records, shell company details, account numbers, transfer dates, client names, day 2, day 3, day 4. You print documents quietly at the office printer during lunch when no one is watching. You make a list of every client account you can find that shows suspicious transfers. There are 23 of them. Day 5. You cross-reference the shell company, Meridian Holdings, LLC, Cayman Islands. Founded in 2020, 1 year before the transfers began. Filed with a law firm that lists 3 other shell companies on the same address. Day 6. You organize everything into a folder. 43 pages of documentation. You look at the folder for a long time. This folder could end a man's $4 billion empire, or it could end your career before it ever began. Either way, you've made your choice. Saturday morning. You're not in work clothes. You're wearing jeans and a dark jacket. You carry the folder under your arm like it's the most normal thing in the world. You take the subway downtown. You don't put on music. You don't check your phone, you just sit and breathe. You get off at the stop closest to the SEC's New York regional office. You walk 3 blocks, you stop in front of a large government building, you stand there for exactly 1 minute. You think about turning around. Then you start walking up the steps. The lobby is quiet, functional, government clean. A uniformed officer at the security desk looks up. You walk up to the desk, you place the folder on the counter, and you say, "I need to report a securities fraud. I have documentation of $4.3 billion in client funds being illegally transferred to offshore accounts." The officer stares at you for a moment, then picks up a phone. 45 minutes later, you're in a small interview room with 2 SEC investigators. You walk them through everything, every document, every date, every transfer, every account number. 2 hours later, you walk back out onto the street. The folder is gone, it's theirs now, and all you can do is wait. The next 14 months are the strangest of your life. You go back to work on Monday, you check your work reports, you go to Sandra's meetings, you eat lunch at your desk, you act like nothing happened. Then, 14 months after you walked into the SEC's office, you wake up to a news notification on your phone. Richard Harlow was arrested at JFK Airport while attempting to board a private flight to Geneva. Federal prosecutors charged him with wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. The case made the front page of the Wall Street Journal. CNBC covered it for 3 days straight. The New York Times called it one of the largest financial frauds in a decade. $2.1 billion of the stolen funds were recovered and returned to clients. 3 months after the arrest, a letter arrived at your home address from the SEC's Whistleblower program. Under federal law, whistleblowers can receive 10% to 30% of sanctions collected over $1 million. Your award? $8.4 million. Your name was never made public. You sit alone in your apartment. For the first time in over a year, you feel light. Here's what I want you to take from this. The world is full of moments where the easy choice and the right choice are 2 completely different things. Every whistleblower who has ever exposed a major fraud faced the exact same moment you faced in this story. The moment of choice. When you know something, and you have to decide what to do with what you know. They all chose to say something. The world is different because they did. And if this story made you think about a moment in your own life, a moment where you knew something, I want you to sit with that. If you want more stories like this, real moments where one decision changed everything, subscribe to Empire Vault. We drop a new story every week. See you next time.